The Kings look to bounce back from their tough loss in Dallas and wrap up a three-team road trip with a win in Chicago tonight. We'll give you a preview of the game and a look at the Blackhawks and answer your emails. All that and more coming up on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. We are at 824 subscribers on the YouTube channel at last check. Thank you to all who have taken the time to subscribe. Our goal is 900 by the end of November. And so far, over the last few months, we've averaged over 100 new subscribers a month. So hopefully we can keep that going. Thank you so much for your support of the YouTube channel. And thank you to all who are listening on the audio podcast as well. And if you like what you're watching or listening, and you have Kings friends, please recommend the show to them as well. My name is Eddie Garcia. I am your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years. 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years. And of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 plus years. We are looking forward to checking out tonight's game. The Kings are in Chicago to take on the Blackhawks, as I mentioned at the top of the show, wrapping up this mini kind of 5-day, 3-team road trip, playing 3 games in 4 days. Against a Chicago team that is not having a great season so far, although a little bit better than expected. We'll explain in just a little bit. But let's check out the projected lineup for the LA Kings tonight in Chicago against the Blackhawks. And this is the lineup we've seen the last few games ever since the ugly loss to Winnipeg and head coach Todd McLellan decided to shuffle up the lines. We have seen Andrei Kopitar, of course, centering the top line, Gabe Vilardi on the right side, and Adrian Kempe on the left side. Philip Deneau centering the second line with Victor Arvidsson and Trevor Moore. That has been consistent throughout, other than maybe a couple of games where Arvidsson missed due to illness. The third line has been a new line and not a bad line so far for the Kings, with Rasmus Kupari at center, Kevin Fiala on the left wing, Carl Grundstrom on the right wing. And then the third line, we believe tonight, will actually have 3 skaters, with Blake Lizotte centering, Arthur Kaliyev on the right wing, and likely Brendan Lemieux on the left wing. Your defensive pairs are Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson. Second pairing is Matt Roy and Sean Dursey. And the third pair, Alex Edler and Sean Walker. Jonathan Quick slated to go in net for the Kings tonight. So your scratches are Jarrett Anderson-Dolan, Quentin Byfield, who's still out with the illness, Brandt Clark, who we'll talk about in a minute, and of course, Alex Iafallo is on injured reserve. So whatever the issue was with the Kings playing with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen in their last game against Dallas appears to be resolved. I have heard no confirmed reports over why that was the case. We mentioned it after the Dallas game that head coach Todd McLellan was evasive when it was asked about it. So we assume there was maybe a minor injury or illness to either Jarrett Anderson-Dolan or Brendan Lemieux. But the Kings are expected to have the usual 12 forwards and 6 defensemen tonight. By the way, Gabe Vilardi and Kevin Fiala are tied for the team lead with 13 points each. That is tied for 11th best in the NHL. Vilardi leads the team with 8 goals. That's tied for 3rd in the NHL. Connor McDavid leads with 11. And Kevin Fiala leads the team with 10 assists. That is tied for 7th in the NHL. As for rookie defenseman Brandt Clark, it appears to be 99% that Clark is going to stay in the NHL this season. But until his skate hits the ice for that 10th game, it's not officially official. We also may have a little bit more intrigue, as it appears that Clark, who took a hard hit from Dallas Stars captain Jamie Benn on Tuesday and may have lost a tooth, is apparently not going to play tonight because of a precaution. The folks over at Mayor's Manor report that he may have gotten a little bit shaked up in that one, and that the Kings are going to go ahead and hold him out for a game just to make sure that he's okay. We'll see if that's the case or not, or if tonight will in fact be that 10th game and signify that he will stay in the NHL all season long with the Kings. It looks like the Kings are going to have an advantage in net tonight. We'll tell you more about that when we look into the Blackhawks, but Jonathan Quick will start tonight. He enters the game with a 3-4 record, 3.44 goals against average and an 888 save percentage. I think Quick has played a lot better than those numbers, but the stats are what the stats are. So, what do we want to see from the Kings tonight? I think it's a pretty predictable, list that we want to see. But first and foremost, a solid defensive effort. The last three wins the Kings have had, they've held their opponents to 3 goals or less. It's not a, real it's not a magical formula, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. The less you allow your opponent to score goals, the better chance you are of winning. But we've seen when the Kings get into these shootouts in these up and down games that it's not really what they want to do, obviously. So it's been better lately. Again, Toronto, obviously, solid effort there. The first game on the road trip as well. But we'll see how it goes going forward. St. Louis is what I was thinking of. But keep it up tonight. Allow 2-1 goals, something like that, against a Chicago team that isn't scoring a ton of goals. And that should be obviously a winning formula for the Kings. I think the top line needs to lead the way. I've been saying it a lot this season. Kopitar, Kepe, and now Velarde. It was Fiala at the start of the year, but those guys need to be a factor, either at even strength or on the power play. We need some points from our best players. Your best players need to lead you. And I think stay out of the penalty box. On paper, the Blackhawks are an underdog in this one. And if we skate 5-on-5 with them, I think the Kings have the advantage. But don't help out Chicago by taking bad penalties like we saw on Tuesday with that Phillip Deneau slash that led to a crucial power play goal for Dallas. So don't help the Blackhawks. Stay out of the box. Keep it 5-on-5. Play solid defense, and hopefully our top line players lead the way and the Kings get a win tonight. I think the Kings have played their best stretch of games over the last week or so after shuffling the lineup, but the Kings need to keep moving in a positive direction. No slip-ups tonight against a Blackhawks team that on paper is not the equal of the LA Kings. We're going to give you a quick look at tonight's opponent, the Chicago Blackhawks, in just a second, but first I need to remind you that BetOnline is your number one source for football betting this season, football betting information this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including the World Series, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more about BetOnline, where the game starts. So I did a crossover episode with Jack Bushman, host of Locked On Blackhawks. If you'd like to check that out, it is available on YouTube. I did retweet the link if you are following me or the show account on Twitter. It was just a quick little show that Jack and I did. Excuse me. I talked about the Kings. He talked about the Blackhawks, and it was a pretty fun little show. If you want to check out that, get a little bit extra info on the Blackhawks. But I'm going to give you kind of a thumbnail on the Blackhawks and kind of tell you what you need to know about this team, what they did in the offseason, what the direction is of their organization, and what do they look like so far this season and what we expect to see tonight. So this team is in, well, I should say the organization. This organization is in full tank mode. They are in a total rebuild. They have pretty much traded everyone away for prospects and draft picks, except their two most iconic players from their recent dynasty run, and that would be Captain Jonathan Toews and star forward Patrick Kane, who eventually this season could be moved as well. We'll have to wait and see. But despite that, the Blackhawks have been competitive so far this season. That said, they come in with a record of 4-4-2. They have lost 5 in a row. But 4 of those 5 games were 1-goal games, and the 5th game basically was a 1-goal game, except they allowed an empty net goal late and lost by 2 goals. So they are hanging around. They are being competitive, despite what the organization's direction is, and despite all of the so-called experts picking Chicago to be one of the worst teams in the NHL. At this point, they're not. Now, they are kind of trending of late in that direction, and hopefully the Kings can keep that going tonight, especially since the Blackhawks have been hit hard by injuries in net. Their number one goalie, Peter Mrazek, is out with a groin injury, and their number 2 goalie, Alex Stalock, just got hurt the other day in their game against the Islanders. He got run over by New York. Casey Cizikas had to leave, and so he's out as well. So tonight, the Blackhawks are starting basically their number 3 goalie called up from the AHL. His name is Arvid Soderblom. He is from Sweden, and he has yet to win a game in his NHL career. He's played 3 games this year. He's 0-1-1, and he's appeared in 5 career NHL games, and his record is 0-3-1. So on paper, it looks like the Kings should have an edge in this one, certainly in net. But let's be honest, would any of us be shocked if the Kings actually lose this one? Because they are unpredictable, are the LA Kings. I wouldn't be surprised if they blew out the Blackhawks. I wouldn't be surprised if they lost the Blackhawks. But at least on paper, it looks good for the Kings because, again, the Blackhawks are on a losing skid. They've got their third string goalie, but the Kings need to come out and play hard and play their game and not just think that, oh, well, we've got the advantage. We'll be okay. We'll win this game. No, they need to, good teams, right? They put their foot on the throat of their opponents when they're struggling. We've seen that earlier this year with the Kings. They hosted a struggling Toronto team, and they hosted a struggling St. Louis team, and they took care of business against those teams. So hopefully that'll be the formula tonight as well for the Kings. We are going to see a couple of familiar faces in the Blackhawks lineup. Andreas Athanasiou, who played for the LA Kings last year, is now playing for Chicago. He's actually playing on their top line, which gives you a bit of an indication as to the direction of this team. And we actually have an email about Andreas Athanasiou a little bit later, or at least a question from an email. And also, former Kings defenseman Jack Johnson is playing on the top pairing for Chicago as well. And this was a guy that was hanging on in the NHL last year. He got a tryout with the Avalanche. He ended up being kind of their 7th defenseman. Ended up winning the Stanley Cup with Colorado, and is now moving on to play in Chicago, where he's getting a lot of minutes. So we shall see how those 2 old Kings will do tonight. We've got some feedback to share with you, some emails to tell you about, and to answer some questions. But first, I want to tell you to, thank you for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. I want to invite you to make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. From games that matter the most to the big stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and beyond the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. That's Locked On Sports Today. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so let's check some emails. I don't think we've done a email segment in a little while, but it's always good to get feedback from you guys, the Locked On Kings listeners. Our first one comes from Chris in Northern Nevada. I know he has emailed before. And to be fair, this email was sent before the loss to Dallas, but Chris said, really like what I'm seeing from the Kings the last few games. The defense and the goaltending have been really good. Looks like the team learned from the mistakes against Winnipeg that really cost them with the sudden change goals allowed. It's nice to see both goalies finishing with saves above 900. The offense is still clicking. Fiala to the third line really seems like it's working. 5 points in the last 2 games for him. Also, the power play has been much more active. I'm not sure what's going on with the second period lately, but I will always take goals in bunches. This team this year can score at any time and score often. Not just one line doing the work either. Seems like the Kings are settling into the system and playing well on all phases, not just offense. Let's see if we can keep the momentum going. Thanks for putting out the great podcast together each and every day. Go Kings, go. And that, again, was from Chris in Northern Nevada. So that was coming off the wins over Toronto and St. Louis. Not sure if Chris would feel the same way after the game against Dallas, but thank you, Chris, for the email. And again, I've mentioned this before, but I do think that the Kings are trending in the right direction. I do think they're playing better hockey. I think they're playing better defensively, being more responsible, making better decisions. I thought the game against Dallas, there was some bad luck that didn't go the Kings' way. I know you can always make the argument that you make your own luck by how hard you skate and by the decisions you make, but pucks bouncing over sticks. That's obviously some bad luck there. So we'll see how the Kings respond tonight. Hopefully come out and play really, really well, really, really hard, and keep it going as for what we've seen of late. Keep playing the way we saw them play against Toronto and against St. Louis. Our next email comes from Jim in Irvine. And Jim, I hope you don't mind. I did edit it down a little bit because Jim went into some backstory about who he was. And I'm going to share a little bit of that. But Jim mentioned that he and his wife is a fairly new hockey fan, and that they have a 20-game package for the LA Kings. So he is a partial season ticket holder. He also mentioned that he is from Boston, and he got to see Bobby Orr play, which is amazing. I mean, that's just wow. Also, Jim says that he skates down in Orange County with different kids and adults, and that apparently he is either a former goalie or still plays maybe a little beer league hockey out there or some pickup hockey. Always good to hear from a fellow a weekend warrior. I play hockey twice a week and just absolutely love it. It's definitely helps my love of the game. So here is Jim had a comment and a question, and his first question comes from someone we talked about earlier in the show, Andreas Athanasiou, and he says there has to be some backstory regarding Andreas Athanasiou. He was a promising and highly touted player, and then I didn't see him in camp, and then he shows up in a Blackhawks uniform playing lights out in the preseason and has kept it up. He looks awesome out there. My question is this: what is the real story of why they let him go? I think he must have pissed someone off. Can't be a cap issue. Let me know what you think. Um, so that was the question that we got from Jim and Irvine. As far as I know, Andreas Athanasiou didn't piss anyone off. Look, Andreas Athanasiou is a guy who has elite skills, but he doesn't really put it together often enough. He doesn't put it together over a full season. He shows flashes of brilliance occasionally. He is an elite skater. His speed is amongst the best in the NHL, but he has a lot of deficiencies in his game. He doesn't play much defense. He's kind of a little bit of a one trick pony. He does kind of like to cheat a little bit offensively and get breakaways. Um, so there's no real backstory on this. He is a guy that the Kings felt like, I know there was a big push for the Kings to be faster in the recent past, and he certainly helped out with that. But again, he's just not a consistent player. He did have a highlight reel goal the other day, though, against Minnesota that I would recommend you checking out if you haven't seen it. It is as skilled and as pretty as any goal you will see, but from any player in the NHL, including Connor McDavid. It was that good. An inside out move and then a backhander, kind of a pull and drive between his legs. It was phenomenal. And that's Andreas Athanasiou. He'll do things like that and wow you. And you're like, why doesn't he do this more often? Why isn't he a 30 goal scorer every year? But again, he's just not consistent. You'll see that once a month, and then you won't see it again, maybe for a month or two. And then he'll do it again, and you'll be like, wow, this guy's amazing. He's got 3 goals in 10 games so far this season. So he's on pace for about 24, which is okay. Maybe, for the situation the Blackhawks are in, he's playing on their top line. So he's getting top line minutes. So he should put up, numbers a little bit better than his career average, which is 14 goals per season, which isn't great considering the offensive upside that he has. He did have 130 goal season in Detroit. He's now on his 4th team. I did check out his career numbers. He was a minus 41 1 year in Detroit. And you can talk about plus minus and how valid that category is, but a minus 45 is pretty jaw dropping. So again, Andreas Athanasiou, he's a guy because of his speed and because of his skill will find a job in the NHL, but overall, he's not going to be on any team that's really looking to make a playoff run just because, like I said, he's not consistent. He doesn't play defense. He'll wow you with some skill every once in a while, and he certainly did with that goal against Minnesota. Go to YouTube, type in Andreas Athanasiou goal. It'll be the first thing that pops up. If you can spell Andreas Athanasiou, you might have to look that one up. But no, he's a fun player. As far as I know, he's a good guy, good teammate. Everybody likes him. But for a team like the Kings that think of themselves as a playoff team and hopefully a little more than that, not consistent enough to have him, and that's why they let him go in the offseason as a free agent. Jim continues and says, this is more of a comment than a question, regarding the goalie situation, assuming that Jonathan Quick, and by the way, he mentioned that he and his wife are huge Jonathan Quick fans. He says, assuming that Quick will continue being an all-star competitor that he's always been, and there's no doubt about that, is there a chance that Cal goes down and Phoenix gets called up? Phoenix Copley is who he's talking about. It's not that I don't like Cal, but saying that he is the heir to the throne of Jonathan Quick would be fine if he was like Logan Thompson or Carter Hart or Igor Shesterkin or even Connor Hellebuck or even Jack Campbell, but he's not. And he has never consistently, after multiple chances, taken the reins and said, I am the horse. Let's go. I talked about this a few episodes ago and wondered if there was a chance that maybe the Kings would send Cal Peterson down to the AHL and let him find his game there. That was before, though, he had the win over Toronto, and I actually don't think he played that bad against Dallas. I mentioned it on the previous show, even though the 5 goals against. But Jim, as you know, as a goaltender, sometimes your defense has got to help you out, and if they put you in chances where you're one on one with a goal scorer like Rope Hintz for Dallas, more times than not, the skater is going to win that battle. So I don't know that Cal got a lot of help in that Dallas game. Look, there's no question, and I've been mentioning it since since I took over this channel, this show, that Cal Peterson is an enigma right now. We've mentioned it many times. You're right. You are 100% right. He has been given multiple chances to be the heir apparent to Jonathan Quick, maybe before he should have, frankly. And he has not taken the reins. He has not grabbed that position like the Kings thought he would or hoped he would. So right now it's a huge question mark. It doesn't appear based on how I think he's trending in the right direction, albeit a bit slowly. But there's no question he has to take a huge step up. He has not been good enough. He has to be a reliable number 2 option for the Kings because Jonathan Quick, he's 36 years old. He's not. I don't want to say he's not capable. I don't think it's prudent to expect Jonathan Quick to play 60 games this year. He needs to have his time managed better so that if it is going to be him at the end of the year, that he's relatively, rested and ready to go as much as you can be, right? Being a number 1 goalie. So Cal Peterson has to pull part of the rope, and so far he hasn't. And is he ever going to? I think it's a huge question mark right now. And the way the Kings, invested in him for the next 3 years, he's making a lot of money. He's getting paid as much as some starters in the league, and he's not playing like it. So there's no question the spotlight is on Cal Peterson. There's no question that he needs to get more confident. He needs to be better in net, and we'll see if he's trending in the right direction. I think he is, but slowly. But we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, Cal Peterson is certainly a concern. There's no doubt about it. And John in San Diego has a concern about Sean Durzi. He says, what the hell is going on with Sean Durzi? I liked what I saw from him last season, but this offseason, he gets a new contract and he looks like a marginal AHL player. At this point, I thought with the confidence the team showed in Durzi with the new deal and his brief experience from last season, he would be better this year, not worse. Can we send him to the AHL and call up Jordan Spence? Yeah. Like Cal Peterson, Sean Durzi has been a disappointment so far this year. I don't think there's any question about that. And I have a friend of a friend who is a Kings fan who I text with occasionally. And he and I got into a bit of a debate in the offseason. He thought that they should trade Sean Durzi, that his value would never be higher, and that we had guys like Jordan Spence that could fill his shoes, Brant Clark. And I said, no, Sean Durzi proved it last year. He's an NHL caliber defenseman, and you don't trade away guys who've proven it at the NHL level. Well, Paul, if you're watching, so far you appear to be right in this one, but we'll see. Sean Durzi has, ever since that decision he made against Vegas on opening night, where he basically threw away a point for the LA Kings and gave the puck away in the final moments and Vegas scored to win it. He's had issues, and maybe that play has put him more in the spotlight and we're all paying attention a little bit more, but he has definitely had some bad decisions in his own end that have led to turnovers, and you can't do that. I know his calling card is offense, and I do like his offensive game, but ultimately he is out there and he has to be at least responsible defensively. He can't completely cancel out all the good things he does offensively by playing so poorly defensively, and it's got to get better. It doesn't look good right now. As for John's question about sending him to the AHL, he would have to clear waivers. I don't think he would. And I don't think the Kings are, in a position where they want a young, talented offensive defenseman to be plucked by another team for nothing in return. So I don't see that happening. And hopefully he gets better, because you're right. He has not progressed from last year. And I liked what I saw from him last year. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it was that play against Vegas that has kind of shaken his confidence, but it's not there at this point, and it's got to get better. And I think defensemen in the NHL kind of have to be like defensive backs in the NFL. There's going to be times you're going to get beat or you're going to give up a goal. You got to turn the page. You got to move on. You got to be mentally tough and take it, shift to shift, play to play. you can't allow things that happened on the previous shift or the previous game to affect your decision making and what you do in the next game. So, yeah, Sean Dursey is struggling a little bit this year for sure. I'd like to see a much better decisions from him in his own end. Keep the offensive side of his game going, but some of the things he does at his own end are definitely questionable. And like I said on yesterday's show, we talked about keeping Brant Clark up at the NHL level. I trust Brant Clark, a rookie, more than I do Sean Dursey at this point. So thank you to John, thank you to Jim, and thank you to Chris for the emails. Really appreciate it. If you would like to send me an email, your feedback is always welcome. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. We are on Twitter at LockedOnLAKings and on Instagram at LockedOnLAKings. And again, thank you for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen today. Always encourage you to make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Still Roden and Flip Livingstone bring you the fantasy edge and keep you ahead of the competition with daily updates on news, analysis, and advice Monday through Friday. Locked On Fantasy Hockey, available on YouTube, Audacity, and wherever you get your podcast. All right, we've got Blackhawks Kings tonight, 5:30 Pacific time face-off. It is going to be broadcast locally on Bally Sports Net and will be heard on the LA Kings iHeart Radio app as well. So hopefully tomorrow we recap the Blackhawks game and we get the chance to talk about the Kings playing a great game and then coming home and trying to keep this momentum going. Fingers crossed that the Kings take care of business tonight in the Windy City. Talk to you tomorrow on Friday's show. Again, looking forward to talking about a win. Until then, I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you so much for supporting Locked On LA Kings. We always appreciate it. And as we always say to close out the show, go Kings go.